Hello, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to episode 17 in season 2 of the P.W.P sessions. I am your host, Noelle Figueroa, aka the poet, aka the anointed pen. Thank you so much for tuning into tonight's episode. I'm honored for the opportunity to interview another poet by the name of Jacob R. Moses. And before we dive into the conversation, I'm going to do a brief introduction. So as mentioned, this is episode number 17. And for those that are not already familiar with this podcast, the P.W.P sessions, or the Poets with Purpose sessions, is a podcast that I created where I interview new or established authors of poetry, as well as poets or rappers. I feature a performance of their work along with a Q&A session at the end of the interview. I am your host, Noelle Figueroa. I am a poet, author, blogger, workshop facilitator, and event host, and I am the creator of the P.W.P sessions. Tonight's guest is Jacob R. Moses, and this is his bio. Jacob R. Moses, aka Jack M. Friedman, is a poet and spoken word artist from Staten Island, New York. He is the author of the full-length poetry book, Grimoire. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Grimoire. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Grimoire, which is done out of 2i Publishing back in 2021. Currently, he is a graduate student at Southern New Hampshire University, pursuing a master's in English and creative writing with a concentration in poetry. His poetry spans 16 countries. These include the US, the UK, Canada, Ireland, France, the Netherlands, Ukraine, Nigeria, South Africa, Mauritius, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Thailand, Iraq, and Singapore. Awesome. Now, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you Mr. Jacob R. Moses. Hey, Jacob, good evening. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Noelle. Thank you for having me on this show.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to start out with a basic question that I ask all my guests. Who is Jacob R. Moses? How would you describe yourself or define yourself?
I was an audience member in the last podcast, and I was really trying to ponder exactly what I was going to say to answer this question. And I guess the best thing that I can do is say that I am a poet, I am a spoken word artist, but in addition to that, I'm also a mystic, an aspiring educator, and just an all-around creative person, ultimately. And in addition to that, I consider myself a number of different archetypes, and the father is definitely the big one. And along with the poet, I'm also a healer and a muse.
Awesome.
That sums it up.
Excellent. That's excellent. Well, let's get right into it. First of all, congratulations. Is this your first full-length book that you've published?
This is my first full-length book, yes.
Awesome. And I'm sorry, can you pronounce the name of the title again?
Grimoire.
Grimoire.
Grimoire. Grimoire.
Grimoire. Awesome. What's the meaning behind that title? Like, what was the inspiration for coming up with that title?
Okay, well, a grimoire is a book of spells, and this particular book is set up like a book of spells with 8 different sections, 8 poems in each section. So there are 64 poems in this book, and this does make it the largest collection I've ever put together. And the one thing that I wanted to express within this book is a theme of self discovery and self awareness. I put them in different categories such as creatures and herbology, demonology, the type of subjects you would probably find at the Hogwarts School of Wizardry and Witchcraft, basically.
Hmm.
And I wanted to create this theme because I wanted to just kind of demystify that which is mystical.
Hmm. There's definitely a very unique concept for a book. You know, that's definitely just the title alone should grab people's attention, if anything. But would you say that the contents of the book is it a combination of, I don't know if I'm asking this correctly, but would you say it's a combination of do you intertwine fantasy with reality? Like what how would you describe like the poetry that's in the contents of the book?
Well, I would definitely say that there are definitely elements of it that are surreal. I would also say that many of the poems that are in that book could be read as if they are spells,
Mhm.
which I really think adds a very interesting dimension to this. And I feel that when we start to look at our words as magic, when we start to look at our words as intentions that we throw into the universe, we become a lot more aware of our own power as
Mhm.
poets.
Wow, that's definitely a unique approach to poetry for sure. Now take me back to the beginning, following along those lines. When you first started writing poetry, was that your intention from the beginning? When you first started writing poetry, like how exactly did you get into poetry and develop your writing style?
Well, the interesting thing is when I started writing poetry, I was mostly writing political poetry. And I had different phases in my writing. I've been a member of the poetry community for going on 21 years now. And, the one thing that I keep in mind is that I've kind of had different versions of myself that have come up over the years. I've written about politics, I've written about my issues with my mental health, I've written erotica, I've written more comedic satirical pieces, experimental pieces, and now I think spirituality is really the crux of what I'm writing at this point.
Mm. Awesome, awesome. Um, what would you say is the main motivating factor for you to be a writer and of poetry? Was there like one particular reason or factor that stands out, or there's several? Like, what's your take on how you got into it? Your
I think
motivation?
sure, sure. I think the one thing that I took out of it, or that I take out of being a poet, is that I typically write about the things that a lot of people are thinking about but are afraid to say.
Mhm.
And I think that many people, when they've heard me read, have felt incredibly validated by some of the things that I say about my emotions and my feelings and my thoughts. And so many times I'll encounter people who ask me to read me poetry to them, read for me to read poetry to them.
Mhm.
And they'll be amazed by a number of different things, such as the fact that I'm describing emotions that a lot of people have a very hard time putting into words.
Mhm.
And my other motivating factor is being able to relate to people, being able to have people be inspired and really feel like they're not alone in this world. I feel that if I'm reading poetry at an open mic and somebody is touched by at least one line that I've written or one line that I've read, I'm ahead of the game.
Mm. Absolutely, absolutely. Now you mentioned politics as being like one factor of your subject matter. Would you also say that you touch on mental health in your poetry, or is it just the fact that you're writing poetry, is a way of being therapeutic to mental health issues? Like, what's your take on that?
All of the above, basically. All of the above. I do write about my mental health in my poetry. It's been a keystone of my poetry for as long as I can remember. I am someone with bipolar depression,
Mhm.
and I do struggle with it, but at the same time, I excel with it as well. I credit having a diagnosis with really expanding my creativity, and I credit it for being able to look at perspectives which many people are either afraid to look through, or perspectives that people don't even know exist.
Mhm.
And I feel that in my writing, I do want to be able to create that feeling that is relatable to people, people who are afraid to speak up about their emotions, are afraid to speak up about any kinds of issues that they are having within their own minds and within their own hearts and spirits and bodies. And I ultimately feel that, well, getting back to the political part of it, though, I know you mentioned politics. I started writing on September 12th, 2002, which was a year and a day after 9/11. I am a native New Yorker.
Mhm.
It's hard to not feel a certain way about 9/11.
Right.
And what I was basically feeling was that, yes, okay, people are calling to unite the country, but the one thing that I was keeping in mind is, united for who?
Mhm.
That was the one thing that always stuck out, because people are talking about how united America is, and at the same time, there's all of this anti-Muslim sentiment that is happening. There is
Right.
all of these anti-immigration sentiments, and it really makes you question who's being united.
Exactly. Exactly. It does things like that does make you call things out in that regard. And I think as poets, I think Nina Simone had mentioned that it's an artist's duty to reflect the times. And what you just
Yeah,
brought up is an example of that. Like, you know, when you're talking about subjects like that, those questions do come to mind. Like, yeah, this country, they talk about unity, but unity for who? And that makes you, dive into that a little bit deeper. Like, if all this talk about unity, united for who? Very, very, you know, a poignant question, and it's things like that as poets, we need to call out and bring to people's attention. And with that being said, along with talking about politics and talking about, current events and mental health, are there other subjects that you uh gravitate to in particular, or are you the type of poet that just writes, based off of what you're feeling at the moment? Like, what's your approach to your poetry?
I don't think I have one approach. I think all of the approaches that you mentioned are approaches that I've taken on. And plenty of times I'll just go into nature. I do write a lot of poems about nature. So plenty of times I'll cross the street, go to the park, and just start writing. I'll basically get inspired just by looking at the skyline, or sitting underneath my favorite tree,
Mm.
hiking the trails, going to one favorite spot of mine, which is a chimney in the middle of Willowbrook Park. After taking this long trail with a whole bunch of bridges, there's this chimney that's right at the trail. And I just love getting inspiration from that particular area. There are a lot of places in the park I go to, and I've even been dubbed the Wizard of Willow because of the fact that I am a magician. And then on top of all that, Willowbrook Park is my home away from home. It's
Mhm.
a place where I go to collect my thoughts. It's a place where I go to organize myself and really feel at peace with the world around me. And so nature oftentimes does play a big role in my writing.
Mhm.
And I can also say that I've had phases. I've definitely had phases when it comes to the types of things that I've written about, but there are certain things that do remain as mainstays, such as mental health, such as social justice, such as the occasional erotic poem.
Right.
I've had a penchant for erotica in the past, maybe like between like 2010 and 2012 or something like that.
Mhm. Excellent, excellent. Now, before you made the decision to write your book, how would you say that you developed your skills as a writer? Like who or what was the like the keys in helping you to develop your own writing style?
Ooh, that's a very good question. And what I can definitely say is I learned through some of my favorite poets who were Robert Frost, Emily Dickinson, and my ultimate favorite was Lawrence Ferlinghetti. And I love the beat era of poetry. I feel like it's greatly influenced the type of style that in which I write. But in addition to that, I've also learned through going to open mics with other poets. And I'm happy to say that two of them are in the audience right now, Douglas G. Cava and Jessica R. Kratz. Big up, y'all. And I've learned a lot through them. And I've learned a lot through just living.
Mhm.
I feel like life has been the greatest teacher for me when it comes to improving my writing. And I have taken classes in the past, but I feel that the greatest lessons that I've ever learned have just been through living, experiencing,
Mhm.
surviving.
Right. Yeah, definitely. When you take those experiences into account, that leaves your writing in a more transparent position. That definitely resonates with people. And with that being said, take me on the journey to putting your first book together. Congratulations again. I'm sure that it was there was a huge sense of excitement and relief, when you got that box delivered and you opened it up and you saw, your books for the very first time, a completed work with your name on it. Take me on the journey of how that book came together. Like, what was your reason for wanting to put together this book, and what did it take to put it together from start to finish?
Okay. Well, this book is a compilation of three chapbooks that I had written under Jacob Moses previously, and those books were And the Widows Smiled, Art Therapy 101, and Seance.
Mhm.
All of the contents of those three chapbooks are in Grimoire, along with 18 other Easter eggs that I threw in there. The experience is completely different, even though it's the same poems that are in these three books. The order is completely different. The experience is completely different. These three chapbooks that I mentioned were originally published by cyberwit.net, which is a publisher in India.
Mhm.
And so I figured, you know what, let me make an American debut.
Mhm.
And so I made an American debut under Jacob R. Moses. I had written previously under my legal name, Jack M. Friedman, but felt like I needed a change for a while.
Mhm.
I felt like I've really needed a change. I always wanted to take on a pen name, and Jacob R. Moses is an homage to that. It's based on my Hebrew name, uh, Jack, translating to Jacob, and my middle name is Martin, so that became Moses. And I added the R there to represent the name Reuben, which was my father's Hebrew name, Reginald.
Mhm.
So, as a Jew, as an Ashkenazi Jew specifically, I always make it a point to honor the deceased. And so I wanted to honor my father by throwing the R in there. Let's see, what else can I say about this? Oh, yeah. When I first put together Grimoire, it was originally going to be the 40, 46 poems that I had originally written in those three chapbooks. And then I submitted it to publishers, and Tony Langhorne got back to me from 2i Publishing and told me he was really interested in working with me. And he was the one who came up with the idea of setting it up like a spell book. And I was, couldn't go wrong with that.
Mhm.
And he gave me some ideas. He wanted me to include some more poems in there. And I did. I threw in 18 more, and I wound up dividing them into those 8 different sections. And I know that Tony did not give me any specific advice on how to organize it, but at the same time, I was inspired. I was definitely inspired to do it that way. If it's going to be set up like a spell book, let me set it up into chapters. Let me set it up into sections. And a little trivia about me, I'm very big on numbers and numerology. One of my favorite types of numbers are square numbers. So I had 64 poems and 144 pages. So 8 square and 12 square, I can't complain about that. I just love those square numbers. I really do. I mean, my birth year is a square number, 81. So that just kind of intensifies it.
Wow, wow. But what was that process like? I mean, did you have a hard time deciding what specific poems were going to go into this book?
I knew that all 3 of the chapbooks were going to go in there, but deciding which other ones I wanted to throw in there, yeah, that was a little bit difficult. I wanted to find material that had been previously unreleased or material that I had submitted to publishers but hadn't gotten accepted.
Mhm.
So I wanted to really find poetry that really fit in with the general theme of magic. And so with these particular sections that I had put together, I was specifically looking for poetry that could potentially fit under a section like herbology, like demonology, like incantations, rituals, etc.
Mhm. And how long would you say was the process from the time you decided to conceive the book to the time it was actually finished? Like how long did it take altogether?
Mm. Okay, well, I had originally started submitting the manuscript in April, and I believe that, or March or April, and I believe that Tony had gotten back to me around that time. Grimoire was eventually released on October 1st, 2021, but I had initially started getting this work out there in 2020 after the release of my last chapbook seance, which was a pandemic project. And then when I wound up learning about 2i publishing and seeing the types of designs that Tony Two Eyes, as he's colloquially known as, was capable of doing, I just thought to myself, you know what, if I can get the 2i treatment, which I didn't know it was even pronounced 2i, I was just like, I publishing, okay.
Right.
I captain who lives in a pineapple under the sea. But putting that aside, I was really glad to have joined up with Tony. I was really glad that Tony took an interest in me. And I remembered that a little other anecdote is that I had followed 2i Publishing on Instagram. I had followed Tony Two Eyes on Instagram and had seen some of his live shows, one of whom was with someone who I know a lot of people know in this community, Dara Kalima.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I was definitely inspired to be a part of this team. And to this day, I'm really grateful that Tony recruited me. Really grateful that he is someone who was a real beacon of inspiration and also did the art and cover design for Grimoire as well. So this is a joint effort. He did the art, I did the writing.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I was
Yeah,
really glad.
definitely. I'm definitely familiar with Dara and Tony. Yeah, they're both definitely awesome inspirations in their own right. And it's awesome that you were able to connect with somebody that was able to help you, in a sense, birth your baby, more or less, to help you give birth to something that resonates with who you really are, as a poet and an author. That's an awesome achievement that not everybody can say that they've done. So the fact that you took a step out and did it, that's something to be proud of, for
Thank
sure.
you. Thank you so much, Noel.
Now, I'm sure you're familiar, with, dealing with publishers or submitting to publishers. And then I'm also sure that you're quite familiar with, self-publishing. Now,
I,
do you personally have a preference over one or the other, or do you feel either one would work for you? Like, what's your take on that?
I've done a lot of self-publishing, and I feel that being represented is definitely something that I have a greater preference for having. And my reasoning behind that is because I've done the self-publishing grind for a very long time. And I've really been able to build up a lot of, I've really been able to build up a lot basically through getting that hustle on. And
Mhm.
getting that hustle on is tough. It is very difficult. You got to make it a point to expand beyond your own horizons. You've got to make it a point to really build up an audience in order to really be able to make something out of yourself by self-publishing. So when it came to my last book, I wanted to get that representation. I wanted to get that level of admiration instead of just throwing a whole bunch of crap on a paper and wondering if it's even worthy of seeing the light. And so having that validation from Tony really did boost my self-esteem dramatically. And I feel that that is really like a great measure of how you can really get your words out there and really get your words appreciated. Because even though I am not against self-publishing because I have done it numerous times, I definitely feel that at a certain point after starting out with self-publishing, you need to start adding more weight to your regimen.
Right,
It's kind of
absolutely.
like building that muscle. Every time you try to add a little bit more weight, a little bit less repetition, and as a result, add a lot more strength to yourself and really develop the courage to face an audience that your publisher genuinely believes you can face without hesitation.
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm in full agreement that when it comes to a publisher, that's like the next level of your journey as an author and a poet. So I'm in full agreement with that. Now let's talk about poets. Let's talk about inspirations. What poets move you? What poets or which poets grab your attention?
Mm, okay. So I used to watch Def Poetry on a regular basis. I wound up getting every single one of those episodes on DVD.
Nice.
DVD. I don't
Excellent.
have a DVD player, but at least I got the memories.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But I've always been inspired by them. Suhair Hamad has always been a huge favorite of mine from that series. Stacey Ann Chin, Black Ice, Bosia, the whole nine. But occasionally I will watch Button. I will see some of the poets on there. Uh, I will say this, every so often there is a poet that does wind up making it into the mainstream. And I know the most recent one is Amanda Gorman. And I do have a lot of respect for Amanda Gorman. I've listened to her read stuff even beyond the inauguration. And I'm just amazed at all the stuff that she can do with words. I'm really amazed by all the constructions, all the rhymes, all the wordplay.
Yes.
I'm in awe. I'm definitely in awe of Amanda Gorman for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I have a book, and she's definitely a trailblazer in her own right. And I can definitely agree that she's definitely inspiring, and her work definitely resonates with me. I'm still in the process of reading her book. It's so much to take in, but it has so much weight to it that she's definitely a source of inspiration without question.
Mm,
Now
I
let's
def-
talk about representation. Now I'm sure you've heard, the word representation thrown around in different circles for one reason or another. Now, when it comes to you as a poet, as an author, how important is it? How important is it to you to make sure that you're representing yourself in your totality? Whether you're talking about, manhood, race, religion. We've touched on mental health issues being addressed. All the things that make you who you are. How important is it to you to make sure that you're representing yourself when you're writing or performing your work?
oh, it's definitely important. I definitely want to make sure that I keep my story as authentic to my experience as possible. And these are experiences that I've had as a Jew, as a member of the LGBTQ community, and especially as someone with a mental health diagnosis. I've wanted to really just take as much control over those narratives so that nobody else can do it for me.
Mm.
And I'll just say this: there will be plenty of times where people may exploit you. There will be times where people may take advantage of you. But in reality, for me, I've been very affirmed in my story. I've been affirmed that I am telling the truth, that I am being as authentic as possible, representing myself and representing the communities that I am a part of. And I can definitely say that that has been a hallmark of what I've been doing for the past 2 decades. I've always wanted to be as honest as possible in my writing, and
Mhm.
ain't nobody catching me in no lies anytime soon.
Mhm. Awesome, awesome. And with that, that provides the perfect segue to the next segment, because now it's time for you, sir, Jacob, to take the mic. Now, at this time, you'll have space to do up to 5 poems of your choice to give our audience an idea of, who you are and who you are as a writer and as a poet. So at this time, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Noel. Okay. So I'm going to start with this first poem, which is from the book Grimoire, and it is called Genesis of Jacob. Now, this was also published in Auroras and Blossoms for their NaPoWriMo collection for National Poetry Writing Month in 2020. Genesis of Jacob. On the pink moon, I left behind a dozen years of instability. A tribe was born for every year I tossed insanity into the forge. Each tribe presented a gift rising from these sacrifices. My darkness, illuminated by the rising sun of Reuben. My walls, excavated through subterfuge of Simeon. My heart, protected through vision of Levi. My weakness, absolved via the lion's heart of Judah. My justice, calibrated through the scales of Dan. My kindness, liberated by the dough of Naphtali. My community, connected with the tents of God. My peace, harvested within the olives of Asher. My universe, explored through observations of Issachar. My finances, supplemented by the travels of Zebulun. My dreams, realized through many prophecies of Joseph. My sacrifices, rationed through the appetite of Benjamin. Indiscretions, sacrileges, lamentations, transgressions. I become the genesis in which my evolution tells me that Jacob is who I must be. I await the exodus in which my revolution tells me that Israel is who I must embody. I am the healing force who dwells in gardens inherently nourished. I am the poet who has survived long enough to scribe his legacy. Now, another project that I'm working on is going to be what I hope will be my next book, which will be called Drunken Pioneer. And this is a poem which is going to be in that book, and it is called Flight of the Raven. Now, I should mention that all of the poems in this future publication I am writing in grad school. I'm currently working on a thesis assignment, and my final project is going to be a full collection of poetry, which I hope to get to publishers soon. Flight of the Raven. Young Raven watched the carnage, hospitality, null and void, once a Jewish sanctuary, devolved Latvian pit of doom, watched their population slaughter soaring, led only by her keen third eye. Journey of a kindred sage resonated throughout the time-space continuum. Obsidian feathers in a crimson world, gold fields surrounded her talons, coat of arms denoting Prel, hurt her heart, watched bodies drop. She called upon her ancestors, 1 century prior in Baltimore. One elder raven bestowed warning upon a poet mourning his soulmate. Young Raven processed pain, retained, accepted her role as a spectator, saw through injustice and false logic, yet was still an eyewitness of true love. Thank you. This next poem I also plan on including in the collection Drunken Pioneer. This poem is called Saudade. And for those unfamiliar with the term, it's spelled Saudade. A lot of people see it and they pronounce it saudade, but the Portuguese pronunciation is saudade. And that is a painful longing for someone or something that you won't ever be able to get back. Usually it's the type of emotion that doesn't have an English equivalent. And so it's best described as being a painful yearning and longing for someone. Saudade. Amid happiness lies the burning of security fueled by loss. This is the melancholy with a name so tightly knit into a shroud, blanketing this relentless yearning. As I keep his image alive on my altar, I keep wishing, I keep praying, I keep hurting. Perhaps one day my tears will harbor 18-karat gold. One day I won't be green to the ways of love, but the heart chakra radiates like an emerald. I am not alone in my struggles to maintain amid dysphoria with the Portuguese name. Saline coagulates every inspiring word as depression remains in a solid state. Poem number 4 is called Terracotta Blessings. I originally submitted this poem to Poets for Haiti, or Poetry for Haiti, and then it eventually wound up getting accepted as an honorable mention prize for Highland Park Poetry, which is Highland Park, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. And I was definitely honored by that. And this was inspired by a ritual I did with a rose bush, and I'll see if I can explain this further just by reading the poem. Intentions line the bottom of this pot, paper soaked within cinnamon and rain, with olive oil soaking my desires, once shut within an oblong wooden box. Now added to the mix are rose petals, sage stems, incense, bay leaves, parsley, and mint, dwelling under varieties of dirt, prepackaged and collected from the ground. A plant with yellow roses sits inside my terracotta pot. Symbiosis, replenished solar plexus energy, this equinox, fertile, vernal, early. Alacrity of sun, guidance of moon, umbilical cord formed in the ether. Spring afternoon, weeks ahead of schedule, abundance and compassion in the roots. Okay, this is my last one. Definitely have to read a love poem. See my partner in the audience here, so I gotta say hey. Sonnet, Affluence of Wonder. Geometry within a sacred shrine. No conquest of this village can degrade. Illuminated staircase, bright moonshine. Our apparitions emanate from shade. Tall gates extending for 1,000 miles. Serenity within this fortress sought. Our amphitheater, no one dares defile. These ivory domes encase our embalmed hearts. Within this hanging garden we will dwell. Our luminescence shines upon the sea. We will stand tall amid colossal bells as mausoleums columns still the breeze. Within this temple, our hands live in sync. Upon the mountains, to our love, we drink.
Wow, wow, wow. Ladies and gentlemen, that was original poetry performed by Jacob R. Moses. Yo, man, awesome poetry, man. I love the wording of your poetry. I love it. I was able to get powerful imagery. You know, I was able to close my eyes and literally get to see the scenes of what you were saying. It's like the creativity that you have and your use of wording is very powerful. You know, it stokes the imagination, and then this want to say thank you, man. Thank you for taking time to share it. It's very powerful work, very creative, and I know I'm inspired, and I'm sure our audience has been inspired this evening as well.
Thank you so much for that, Noel. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you for that.
Now, in the chat, Cynthia was asking about your poem, Sriracha. She's saying, could that also cover the loss of what or how a person used to be?
And I did answer that in the chat, and I said 100%.
Okay, awesome.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, it's any kind of a painful longing. Usually it's for a friend or a family member, but yeah, you can definitely feel Sodacha based on something that you miss within yourself. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Now, this time, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to shift gears for a little bit. And now, at this time, we're going to go into the Q&A portion of this episode. So at this time, if any of you has a question or comment for Jacob, you know, feel free to unmute yourself and give your question or comment.
Jacob, thank you so much for answering my question. You are a very deep and prolific person, and I appreciate your work so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Cynthia. Thank you.
Hey, Cynthia, good to see you. Thank you for that. Awesome. Anyone else have a question or comment for Jacob?
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in.
Hey, Douglas.
Hey,
Doug, how's it going?
Hey. Yeah. Okay. Here's one. Well, in our conversations, you mentioned, you know, getting your start in poetry a year after 9/11. So my question is, how did the impact of that world event at the time, at that particular time, and also at the age you were at, how did it impact your writing back then, and how does it still influence you now?
That is a good question. That's a very good question. I feel that, I mean, I had written long before 9/11, but I wasn't sharing it with anybody. And I felt that I would probably get committed and the men in the white coats would probably come after me if I did show the stuff that I was writing back when I was a teenager. I was 19, 20 years old when 9/11 happened, 20 years old when 9/11 happened. And so I felt that in a lot of ways, there was a lot of lockstep groupthink happening. And I think it always kind of inspired the rebel within me. And as much as I mourned the loss of a city that day, I wound up mourning the loss of humanity also. And I felt like a lot of humanity was really being lost. I felt like just as Noel mentioned that Nina Simone quote, I was trying to comment on the times that a lot of people were not talking about, things that a lot of people were afraid to say. A lot of people were afraid to call out the heavy-handed jingoism that was happening back then. A lot of people were afraid to say something that was contrary to what the American government was saying and what the flags were saying and what organized religion was saying. There were so many things that were being pushed upon us. And in reality, there was a lot of exclusion that was happening as a result of that. And I did feel the need to call that out. I did feel the need to mention that, hey, the people that you are decrying as terrorists and all these other racial slurs that you are imbuing upon people, yeah, newsflash, they're human beings also. And many of them are Americans. There is no one America. There is one country, but it's one country out of many. And, you know, that's basically e pluribus unum right there. We cannot forget about the many before we put the oneness before it. We've got to remember that America is a mosaic. We've got to remember that America is one of those places where we are united by the freedoms we are told that we have, but we are also divided by the ways in which those freedoms are dispersed. We are divided by the ways in which we are allowed to express these freedoms. We are divided by the ways in which people in power try to dictate what we're learning, how we're learning, and ultimately try and steer us as far away from the truth as humanly possible to fulfill an agenda. So to answer your question, Doug, I am still writing like this. I am still very affected by 9/11. It's the reason that I started writing, but it's also the reason I'm going to continue writing.
Wow,
So
excellent.
thank you for that question, Doug. Thank you.
Yes, that's awesome. Thanks, Douglas, for that question. Anyone else with a question or a comment for Jacob?
Do you have, I guess, any type of social media connection upon which we can, take a look at your works or anything of that nature?
Yes, I do. I am on the internet, which is poetryofjacobmoses.com. I'm typing that in the chat right now.
Awesome.
On Instagram, I am known as Jacob Reuben Moses, JACOBREUBEN, like the sandwich, MOSES. I am also on Facebook. You just got to search Jacob R. Moses and you'll be able to find me. And one way that you'll be able to find me is that it will say Wizard of Boogo in parentheses. So that's like the telltale sign that you'll be able to find me, Jacob R. Moses, Wizard of Boogo.
Awesome.
I had like a specific Facebook page, Jacob R. Moses Poet, but the metaverse just said, you're not worthy of having a page. And
Oh, true.
Oh, the audacity.
yeah,
Oh, the
I mean,
nerve.
not literally,
God.
not literally. MZuck doesn't have that much of a hard on for me, but what I can definitely say is that, what I can definitely say though is that I lost my administrative rights, damn it. And thankfully I wound up making up for that because I have a digital creator profile on Facebook. So
Cool.
I mean, the sheer audacity of it all.
Yeah.
I mean, let the authors live, doggone it. I mean, seriously.
yeah, it's like, it just makes me wonder. It really does make me wonder, what the hell did I do to get underneath that man's craw?
Oh,
I mean, I know I got banned once for singing that anti-Barney song that we used to sing in the 90s.
well, we're not gonna give the haters energy right now. We're gonna keep
Nah, we
this
ain't.
positivity.
It's all love.
We're gonna keep the vibes going. You dropped some powerful gems tonight, and I do want to ask before we close out, overall, what do you personally intend to accomplish with your work? Like, what do you hope readers would get out of reading your work?
I would hope that readers would be able to really be able to go on their own journeys within themselves and really honor themselves, really honor their desires, really honor their greatest dreams. Because a dream unfulfilled is a horrible thing to me. It's really a horrible thing to just spend your entire life happy, excuse me, having these dreams and not realizing them, not having prophecies and not fulfilling them, and not like the self-fulfilling prophecy that comes along with damning yourself to hell, but the type of prophecy that comes along with seeing a greater vision for yourself, seeing a greater vision for your world and for your society and anybody within your network and beyond. I really want to use my work to reach beyond that, which is just on the surface, and really encourage people to go deeper. That there's so much that this world has to offer that you're not going to be able to find directly, tangibly on this earth. So I do want to encourage people to really dig deep with that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I believe with what you just shared tonight, that's only a small portion of what you intend to accomplish. And I believe you're definitely on that path. And I just want to encourage you, to keep going. I, for one, was inspired, and I'm sure those that are listening to this interview tonight and those that will be watching later, once this is on YouTube, I'm sure they'll share that same sentiment. So I encourage you to keep up the great work, continue to be an inspiration. And one last thing before we close out, are there any other projects or events that you would like to make note of with our audience tonight?
Yes. Let's see. I mean, Drunken Pioneer is still a work in progress. I should mention that Drunken Pioneer is my Wu name generator name. So I figured, okay, let me take a tip from Donald Glover and see what I can do with this ish. But
Nice.
yeah, Drunken Pioneer came up when I typed in Jacob R. Moses. I'm like, you know what? I can roll with that. I can totally roll with that.
Oh, I can't wait to see what comes about with that.
Yeah. And also I should mention that there is a documentary of my my life as a poet that is going to be coming out in June, or we hope that it will come out in June. I've been working with Douglas G. Cava, and another good friend of mine who's a filmmaker, Louis Alzamora. And we're putting together a documentary that features me doing a reading at the Staten Island Barnes & Noble when I debuted Grimoire at the Staten Island Barnes & Noble. So there's going to be footage of this. Doug was one of the readers, and the other readers were Kyoko Hashimu and Michelle Antoine. Tony Langhorne, who was the MC, also reads a poem in this particular documentary. And, the one thing that we're definitely hoping is that we can get it out sometime next month. And I'll definitely be keeping everybody on alert when that happens.
Yes. Definitely looking forward to that. Awesome. Well, at this time, ladies and gentlemen, as we close out this episode, there's just one more thing that I need to do. And that is to say, thank you. First off, Jacob, thank you so much for being my guest. Awesome conversation and equally awesome poetry. I was truly inspired, and I'm sure our audience tonight was just as inspired. Thank you so much for coming through and being my guest and sharing your heart and soul with your poetry. Tune in to the next episode coming up this week, Thursday, May 18th, 2023 at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be interviewing another poet by the name of Sammy B. If you're not already connected, you can connect with Poets with Purpose through Facebook, through the Facebook group, on Twitter @PoetsWPurpose, YouTube channel with the same name. You can also find me on Clubhouse @The Anointed Pen. Now, for more information about Poets with Purpose and the PWP sessions, you can call me at 646-372-6230 or email me at poetswithpurpose@gmail.com. All of my flyers and logos were designed by the awesome team at Eclipse Graphics, New York. You can find them on Instagram at @EclipseGraphicsNY to see samples of their work and connect with them if you like any work done on your own personal projects. And lastly, for those of you that would like to make a donation, you can do so through PayPal, Tap Media Man, $ Anointed Pen, through Cash App, and through Zelly, utilizing my phone number. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a wrap for episode 17. Jacob, thank you again for your time and your talents. Awesome poetry. Thank you so much. You truly blessed the mic tonight. Thank you. Thank you to my audience. This episode will be uploaded to the Poets with Purpose YouTube channel within the next hour or so. So be on the lookout for that. Once it's uploaded, you'll be able to share that through your own social media channels. Thank you so much for your time and attention and support. Have a good evening and God bless. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Noel, and thanks to all of you who joined in.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Appreciate
God
it.
bless.
Bless.